Well, it's finally here. Yesterday was June 25th, the 6-month deadline that Congress gave the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, or UAP Task Force, to release its findings on its investigations and analysis into UAP/UFO documented cases. And I was prepared to be underwhelmed. I knew it might be vague. I knew that they weren't going to even suggest it was extraterrestrials. Even though they said they couldn't rule it out, I knew that they wouldn't actually suggest that that was the case. But I was really hoping that as part of the report, they were going to release new information about new cases and new evidence, maybe even, some footage. But when I saw that the report was only 9 pages, I knew I was going to be disappointed. And at first I was, because it did not provide any information that I was not already aware of or had already been made public. The only case that they brought up as an example of a UAP that they looked into was, I assume it's based on a series of 3 photos that a fighter pilot took, which I knew that fighter pilots are good at, assessing things that are in the air, but they looked an awful lot like partially deflated balloons of some type. Maybe even just Mylar balloons that had floated out. And that's what they concluded. So, nothing new there. But then I went back and I read it again. And I actually read it a 3rd time. And I wrote down the main points. And I realized there's actually a lot you can glean from this. And while this report itself is not monumental in introducing good evidence or documented cases to the public, and in fact, I think most of the disbelieving or highly skeptical public is going to read this and say they got nothing. They're just saying, well, we don't know what some stuff are and some might be this stuff. But I'm going to go over what's actually in the report and then give my analysis on it. So the cases that they looked into span from 2004 to 2021. 2004 being the USS Nimitz Tic-Tac encounter, which started everything. It's what got me into the subject and made me a believer. However, most of the cases that they actually looked into took place within the past 2 years, because it wasn't until 2019 that the Navy actually set up protocol for reporting sightings or data about UAPs, and 2020 for the Air Force. And that was inspired by the Nimitz encounter. The good thing about that is it demonstrates the fact that more have been reported since there, because they have created a reporting procedure. That in itself is a good sign. One of their conclusions were that most UAPs are probably physical objects. However, not all. And they divided cases that they looked at into 5 categories. One is airborne clutter. That's things like birds, balloons, drones, things like that. Natural atmospheric phenomena like ice crystals, temperature variance. There's a lot of weird stuff that can happen in the atmosphere. Secret U.S. Aircraft programs, and foreign adversaries, Chinese or the Russians, and other. And they don't mention extraterrestrials in that, which if I were them, I wouldn't either, because even though I do believe that there is a lot of logic and evidence for the extraterrestrial hypothesis, there are a lot of other options too, and others is good for now until we look more into it. Now, the reason that they were sparse on details in the public report is because a lot of these cases may very well be top secret government or military aerospace programs. And they might not actually know that, but the possibility is there. And so it's actually wise that they didn't provide it to the public. However, I don't know how long the full report they released to Congress is, but I'm sure that they do give a lot of actual evidence and documentation. Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader who actually kickstarted the research into UFOs and started the program in the Pentagon to look into them, I saw an interview with him, and he said one of the reasons he got into it is because he has seen footage and evidence and heard testimony from high up officials that's very compelling, stuff more compelling than the stuff that the public has seen. And so I'm sure that they're going to give that information to Congress, and Congress can, if they see compelling evidence, assuming it is, they might push for more funding for this, and we're going to collect more data and more stuff will come out. So this is significant, not as a comprehensive report, but the beginning of something. So they broke it down into the number of reports and the different type of reports. So they got 144 reports. 80 were detected from multiple sensors like radar and other sensors, but were not necessarily detected visually. They said that, and this is true, that radars can glitch, and radar can be messed with. It's called radar spoofing. So those aren't conclusive. Some might be good. I do think that the Nimitz radar is pretty good evidence. They documented 11 near misses. I'm going to assume they included the very weird UAP that happened off the East Coast, in which two pilots, fighter jet pilots, who were flying 100 feet from each other, reported seeing a sphere within a translucent cube shoot between them. That is a case that is so weird, I think a skeptic might dismiss it as just too crazy to believe. On the other hand, it is so weird that it's kind of hard to imagine they would make that up or confuse what they saw with something else. It's not like a Mylar balloon in high wind shot between them, but who knows? Interesting though. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because at first, so they reported 18 incidents with unusual movement patterns and flight characteristics. And they list some of those characteristics. And at first I thought, well, I've already seen the evidence for that, so what's the big deal? But I'm gonna explain why it is significant in a minute. So they listed objects that were stationary in high winds. That's not possible for airplanes. I don't know how well helicopters can do that. I'm sure not perfectly still, and these were not helicopters. Moving against the wind, maneuvering abruptly. So the really quick zigzag stuff. We're not talking about just highly maneuverable aircraft like the F-22, which is the most maneuverable advanced airplane in existence today. No discernible means of propulsion. Radio frequency energy. I don't know what that means, but it stands out as distinct from normal aircraft. These 18 incidences are the ones where they appear to be aircraft, but they cannot explain how they move. And the reason I think it's significant is because there have been debunkers that have tried to come up with explanations for why pilots misperceived things, why the object wasn't really moving, it wasn't really stationary. Mick West is the most prominent debunker, and he came up with some reasonable sounding explanations to a layperson until I found the videos of a professional aircraft optic systems operator who understands how gimbal camera rotation devices work, as well as at FLIR advanced technical forward-looking infrared systems work. He debunked Mick West, and I trust him a lot more. Mick West just sort of deduced things based on evidence that he found on Google, and because he doesn't want to believe the stuff. I also watched the videos of an F-16 pilot who used trigonometry to determine the distance, speed, size of UAPs, etc. And he made a good case for it. But so I've been convinced. But what's significant about this is that the task force, the government task force, I don't know how big it is and who it's comprised of, but it was their job to investigate it. And the task force agreed with the assessments of the Nimitz witnesses, who there were a lot more than Fravor, and it gets deep. So that's significant because they have officially stated that, like, Mick West's debunking claims, they haven't proven that they're not true, but it is significant that they have rejected those attempts at debunking. So, and what's really important is not just the data they've collected, but that they have introduced plans for further research, strategies to better detect and analyze UAP cases. And they also have recommended more funding for the program. And one of their suggestions is advanced algorithms to search historical data captured and stored by radar. So in the Nimitz encounter, the radar operators were seeing, well, okay, so first of all, this is for having a computer system, an algorithm that collects data from radar systems and other detection systems, and is able to analyze it to detect anomalies in radar that are consistent with reports of how UAPs operate, and then they can collect them, bring them to people to analyze so they can look through them. So that's important. But I think that another possibility is not only to search historical data, but also to create algorithms to detect UAP patterns in real time. In the Nimitz case, the radar operators were watching these weird flight patterns of these mysterious objects for 10 days, something like that, up to 14 days. And for days and days and days, they just assumed they were glitches, because that does happen. It could be radar spoofing, it could be new software problems, and computers have problems. And so they didn't really think much of it. They didn't document it. They didn't, I'm sure they reported it. But the reason that they noticed it at all is because it was on a massive scale. It's possible that there could be not all UAPs appear in flight, as a fleet and stay over an area for 2 weeks. So you could have an algorithm that is designed to detect smaller, more individual sightings, and bring it to the attention of the people in charge, and they can determine if it's a glitch, or they can investigate it. So at least they'll be aware of it. One of the things they brought up about why there are probably a lot more cases is because it's mostly military personnel, and primarily Navy, because they tend to be associated with water. They fear ridicule, or not being promoted because they're crazy. Now that there's an official reporting system, and respected members of the military have en masse come forward and said this is what happens, it's a lot more likely. So that's really important. Another interesting thing that could be used for this purpose of detecting them is that I was watching a video on the future of sixth generation fighter jets. And one of the advancements that they're making is that they're creating a really massive interconnected network that kind of coordinate air, sea, land, sky, space, and all that information is going to be right in those fighter jets, and it's just going to be really it's going to be so usually fighter jets, from what I understand, is that there's usually a flight leader in charge of 4, and they contact the base, and they're sort of communicating back and forth. This sort of system would have these integrated systems that will just map out everything that's happening in real time. If they have the ability to integrate all those systems, it would be a lot easier in real time for sensors radar picks up an anomalous object from the aircraft. You can coordinate, you can look at data from other systems, from satellites, from ground radar, all that. So that's another possibility that I think could help with this. So those are my thoughts on UAPs. I'm going to be making a lot more videos on them. I've taken a deep dive into it. I want to get into all the details, a lot of technical analysis from experts, what I've learned from an engineering and scientific level. Finally, I want to mention that they also, some of the reports, actually the FBI was involved, and so they collected data. So I've gone from feeling disappointed at the lack of new information to actually feeling very optimistic about the future research. If you are a disbeliever or a very intense skeptic of UFOs or UAPs, and you read this 9-page report, I guarantee you all over skeptics and disbelievers, when they see this, they're going to say, okay, like, what do you got? We got some stuff might have been balloons. Some were like other stuff. And then there were like stuff we just don't know. And, you know, because it doesn't give us any new evidence. So it is possible that they don't have a lot more compelling cases than we've already seen. I believe we do, based on what Harry Reid said, and based on the fact that there's enough evidence that the phenomena is real, that we're going to see more research. And the disbelieving and hyper-skeptical public are, I think, going to be very surprised. And because they're going to say there's nothing to see here. And so, like, what more is there to look into? They're not seeing what Congress is seeing. Now, I'm not seeing what Congress is seeing either. But Congress... I think there's very good reason to believe that they're gonna see good evidence, and they are going to probably be willing to fund this more. And if the phenomena is bullshit, no matter how much they fund it, no matter how much research and analysis they do, they're not going to find anything. The evidence from my research is overwhelming that the phenomena is real. And even if in most cases there's nothing unusual about it, it's just, you know, ice crystals and balloons. Even if in most cases, if the phenomena is real in just one of the reported cases, which is the Nimitz, the phenomenon, I believe it's absolutely overwhelming. And if it's just if there's one case like that, I don't see any reason to think that there aren't going to be a lot more. And finally, we're going to see those cases reported, and the more evidence we get, the more we're going to research, and I think it's going to become more and more accepted by the public. And the last time we had a report, there were two reports. There was the Condon report, and I don't remember all the details about it, but the most famous one is Project Blue Book, which I believe was released in the, I want to say 1956. It might have been the early 60s. And Project Blue Book was essentially an analysis that went through and debunked these cases. This is going to be different. So, really excited about the future of UAPs and UFOs, and I'm really excited to have more cases and more evidence to analyze and dig into. So, peace out.